Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Rivera Wilson, and welcome to edTrends, bringing nature education into your classroom. In today's session, we have three presenters who will be talking about this topic. Next slide. Unfortunately, Dr. Lang will not be able to join us today, but he does send his greetings. This is just a reminder that Community Conversations the name has changed to edTrends. I know that we've produced about 24 sessions with the name Community Conversations. In the future, you will receive email and communication coming from Atlas regarding edTrends. Our next session will be on civility in pre and post election when emotions are highly charged. This will be on November 4th, a very timely session. And we will have several presenters from the Capital District Schools and Administration who will be talking about this topic, whose areas are focused on social studies and community engagement. For information about resources that have become available beginning in March of this year, please visit remoteed.org. We have currently 1,700 free educational resources on remoteed.org. If you're interested in receiving CTLE for attending today's session, please contact me. My information will be placed in the chat. In addition to that, you can also visit remoteed.org. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague and friend, Jeanine Flinton.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nature Education Pathway for All presentation. We'd like to introduce ourselves. I'm Jeanine Flinton, and I teach Project Lead the Way, which is a hands-on collaborative STEM curriculum, which really promotes students' problem-solving skills. And I teach that to grades kindergarten through 6 at Galway Central School District. And I am of the generation that grew up spending the majority of their free time outdoors. And I feel that really enabled me to learn so many valuable lessons, and it really spurred my sense of inquiry. So with that, I really feel that providing a child with the opportunity to explore nature fosters all aspects of the child's development. And that's really what brought me to join the New York State Master Teacher Nature Education PLT. Sara?
Hi everyone, my name is Sara Verga. I teach 3rd grade at Pashley Elementary, and that's in the Burnt Hills, Ballston Lake Central School District. I was very lucky to have grown up on a dairy farm in central New York. We had a little over 100 dairy cows and chickens, dogs, cats, pigs. So animals and nature have been a huge part of my life since I was very, very young. I grew up with 4 siblings, so we often would either be at the farm or outside in nature. So that's always been a huge focus in my classroom, and I try to tie that in as much as possible. And since becoming a part of the Master Teacher program and the Nature PLT, it's only encouraged more opportunities to incorporate into the classroom and great conversations with my colleagues. Andrew?
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Ferrone. I'm a 2nd grade teacher at Wood Road Elementary School, and that's in Ballston Spa. I guess really what brought me here, growing up, much like Sara and Jeanine, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to a variety of nature-based activities. And in my teaching career, I began as an inner city teacher, and even now, I've always been in Title I schools, and I've done quite a bit of work with trauma-informed classrooms. And one thing that I really started thinking about when I was doing research and providing and taking professional development about being trauma-informed is I started thinking about what I did when faced with traumatic experiences in my life. And my answer was always I turned to nature. So I got thinking more about how many of the same students who are trying to cope with these traumatic experiences often aren't fortunate enough to have been exposed to nature and don't have that tool in their toolkit. So I kind of narrowed my focus on the benefits of nature and how that can help students cope with some of those challenging situations in their life, as well as the other benefits that I've come across, which are immense. Go ahead, Jeanine. So a brief history about the term nature education. We are the Nature Education PLT. And really, this all started in about the 1940s when the term outdoor education emerged. And that really described like field trips and field studies, excursions, outdoor labs. It was a realization that education can happen somewhere beyond the four walls of a classroom. And it was a big epiphany at the time. And not just that education could happen, but that it could be made better, more authentic, and more long lasting than it can when you're inside of a classroom. And then around the late 60s, early 70s, the main term that was used to describe nature education was environmental education. And this is still very much around today, much like outdoor education. But this referred more to the global awareness of our environment and producing citizens that are knowledgeable concerning the environment around us, help solve problems, help prevent problems from happening before we get to them. And so that's a big part of nature education. And that's something that's a term that people have been working to spread the education as far as our environment for almost 50 years now. So what is nature education? For our PLT, we define nature education as any instance when students are learning in, from, or about nature, not just in a classroom, not just when a teacher takes their kids out onto the field to do some learning, any instance when any person is learning in, from, or about nature. And that's how we define nature education for our PLT. So today we have two main goals, and the first is going to be to explore the camp model as a pathway to integrating nature education into all education. It's a model we developed as a group. And the second goal today is just to foster connections that can lead to the sharing of resources, experiences. We have a great group of people and educators together today. So anytime you get this many people together, it's an opportunity to make those connections and share resources. Now, when we were first tasked with this presentation, one of the biggest challenges was looking at the diverse range of participants. And we knew that we couldn't make this presentation too specific to one age level or skill level or discipline. So we wanted to come up with something that transcends age, transcends subject, transcends discipline, that can reach as many students, as many young adults, and as many adults as possible. So based on our experiences with presenting nature education topics to a wide variety, we came up with a model, which is called the camp model. Jeanine? So you'll see this is just a picture of me camping this summer. The ones on the outside belong to me. But the camp model was born out of our experiences with presenting nature education, and not just our successes, but many of our failures when we're trying to motivate and spread the use of nature education across all disciplines. It's been a long road, and there's a long road ahead, but we've came up with 4 main steps that we found to be extremely effective when trying to spread the influence of nature education. And those steps are to create a sense of urgency, alleviate fears, motivate, and provide access. And we're going to today just walk you through each step and how you can actually conduct each step and what it really means. So I'll start with creating a sense of urgency. When I first started providing nature education PLT to different teachers, these are just a few of the quotes I had teachers tell me at the end of our time together. And it just kind of made me feel, it made me realize that I didn't create that sense of urgency. With everything else I need to teach, why should I dedicate time in my day to nature education? Isn't this something parents should be doing? I have students who can't even read, so this is not very high on my priority list. It was clear to me after hearing these quotes, and these are real quotes that people said to me, all great teachers, caring teachers who put their students first. It was clear that as much as I wanted to say, hey, this is important, you need to take this seriously, I didn't create that sense of urgency for the people that I was presenting to and for the people that are going to be responsible for bringing this to children. And without creating that sense of urgency within the educators and my colleagues, whoever you're trying to spread this word to, it's not going to stick. And so this is a very important first step. Go ahead, Jeanine. There are many ways you can create a sense of urgency. One way that I found to be effective was a book study. I'm sure many people in this meeting are familiar with Richard Louve's work and Last Child in the Woods, preventing nature deficit disorder. I think most would agree that after reading one chapter of that, the urgency is created. And I've met nobody so far that hasn't, after reading that book, said, all right, this is important. There are a number of other books that I suggest here, along with articles. I suggest finding something that is specific to the group that you're trying to motivate and use a book study to create that sense of urgency. Also, networking. There's social media, movements like the Leave No Child Inside movement, Children in Nature Network. These can definitely, following these different organizations, can create that sense of urgency and show people how important it is to get outside. Facts and figures. This is one of my favorite ones. And in the last 10 to 15 years, the amount of quantitative and qualitative research that has been done on the correlation between nature exposure and mental health, physical well-being, academic achievement, you name it. The bottom line is a lot of us have known this for a long time. Being outside, being in nature is healthy. Now, the facts and figures and studies that have been done that prove it are immense. This can be one of the most powerful things for creating a sense of urgency. I urge you to think about your audience and choose facts and figures accordingly. For example, if you know that you're trying to get a group of teachers who are really, their main focus is improving reading within your school, and you want them to incorporate nature into their lessons, find those facts and figures and studies that show that. I was just reading one today about a 2015 study about 3,000 students who were placed in a garden classroom and 3,000 students who were in a control classroom, a typical classroom, same, and everything was kept the same. And the results of the study, as you can imagine, were that those students who were in a garden classroom were able to retain that information better, keep that information longer, and the performance was higher. And so find those facts and figures that speak to the people you're speaking to. I could share them till I'm blue in the face, but there's so much out there. Use that. That is one of the most powerful things for creating a sense of urgency. Also, immersion in nature. Let them feel it. Bring your group outside, whoever it is you're sharing with. And compare the stress levels, the feelings they have when they're learning outside or sharing outside versus when you're sitting in a screen. And finally, current events. Right now, this is more important than ever. I mean, I can speak for myself when I say I've been staring at this screen since about 7:30 this morning. And at the end of this presentation, I'm running an open house and I'm going to be on the screen for another hour with parents. And many of them are probably in the same situation. So there's never been a more important time for us to make sure we disconnect and get in nature, because the benefits are immense. So use those things to create that sense of urgency. And once you have that sense of urgency, then you move to the next step in the model, and it's going to be much more of a sticking point. So I'm going to hand this over now to Sara, who's going to talk about how you can alleviate some of those fears.
Thank you. So when we're talking about alleviating fears, this is directed toward the teacher or the adult in charge in the classroom. So we all know that we have very limited time, and especially this year, our time is even more limited. So like Andrew had said, some of his colleagues said, we don't have time to do this, but you could start really small. So I wouldn't expect too much of yourself or your colleagues if you're encouraging a coworker to incorporate nature education with you. So just keep it manageable. So for example, you could try to find 15 minutes within your schedule and dedicate 15 minutes to outside learning. It could even be reading a book outside where you are reading a book to the children, or maybe the children each bring a book out and everyone is independently reading. Just the fact that you're outside in nature, hearing those different sounds, smelling those different smells, it decreases stress, and whatever the children are doing, perhaps they'll have better focus and attention on that. And then from there, I would just build upon it. So I would say after that 15 minutes out in nature, your kids are going to be hooked and you're going to be hooked because you're going to be feeling good after it. So perhaps the next week you could try to incorporate a lesson in nature. So for example, this week for my ELA, my story is focusing on bats. So we simply just took our textbooks out one day this week and we read the story outside for a change of scenery and to just get outside. But then after, we were talking about how bats use echolocation and their squeaks bounce off of things in nature and come back to them, and that's how they're able to see. So after we read the story, I just had the kids fly around. Mind you, I teach third graders, so if you're a high school teacher, this may be a little different. So they flew around and they found something in nature that the squeak could bounce off of. And most of them, went to a trunk of a tree. Some of them went to the wall of the building that our wooded area in our school connects to. But it just makes the lesson that much more real. And then hopefully when they're thinking about echolocation again, they think about that time when we were outside and it's more prevalent in their mind. And then also talking about urgency, like Andrew had said, it's really worth spending time on just to try to get the kids outside and yourself and your colleagues outside, because it just provides so many benefits to us. And I think once you start small, you really will get hooked. And moving on, so this slide is more dedicated to alleviating fears for students and potentially parents. So as we know, nature can be dangerous, but there's a way to use those as teaching points. So before I bring my class outside for the first time in the year, we'll just talk about, what are some things that are dangerous in nature, and we'll just have a conversation about it. And often the students will bring up a time where maybe they got stung outside. And so insects and bees are something that is posing danger to them in nature. And so from there, we just talk about how can we avoid that happening? And if that does happen to happen, how can we fix that situation? So bringing our EpiPen, staying away from bees if they're on a flower. There's an eighth intelligence in Gardner's intelligence, and it's the naturalist intelligence, and it's just really creating to be having nature smarts. So I feel like having conversations with your students before going out would really alleviate any fears that they may have. I know some children can be sometimes a little nervous about weather. I had a student in the past that wind would make him really anxious. So we would just talk about what will we do if the weather picks up and the wind picks up? Are we going to be okay? And just talk through those fears. Something also that we would recommend, a grab and go safety bag. So whenever I go out into nature, I have a designated bag. And with that, there's my safety kit inside, and I have Band-Aids. I always go out with my walkie-talkie in case I need to get in contact with a nurse or an administrator. And that helps the students feel more comfortable in case they are having some anxieties about going outside, because like Andrew had spoken about, not a lot of children go outside these days, so it's important to help alleviate these fears. Also, seeking approval from your administrator would help. So before I started my nature education with my class, I just had a conversation with my principal, making sure that this was okay and recommended. And I would just make sure that you're communicating. And Jeanine, if you go to the following slide. So in our nature PLT, we have created a template that could go out to the parents and guardians beforehand. And it's just really talking about our philosophy of why we think nature education is so important. And with that, we will be using the outdoors to incorporate lessons, incorporate any topics that we're learning, and how the children can be prepared for outside learning. So wearing appropriate clothing when the weather is getting colder, talking to your child about outdoor safety. And then also, because we live in the Northeast, ticks are pretty prevalent. So we do talk to the parents in this letter about after the children go outside to encourage a tick check. And we include a diagram where there's the most prevalent areas on the body where the ticks would bite. And in the past, I have had some students that become pretty anxious about ticks because they know that the diseases that they can sometimes hold and spread. So to, again, alleviate the fears of that, we just have discussions and we talk about, to be proactive with this when you get home, make sure you check yourself, and just establishing a thorough washing and cleaning habits. And it's always been well received from my parents. And so I think this really helps alleviate fears. So now that all the fear and anxiety is out of the way, we can go on to how can you motivate the children to, get excited with nature and spark that creativity, the imagination, and the want to really get outside and learn because it offers us so much. So if you're in an area where maybe there's not a lot of nature or woodland area around you, you could always bring nature inside. So leaves, pine cones, acorns, fallen bark. I say fallen because children sometimes want to pick the bark off, but I say we shouldn't really be doing that to trees. We don't want to hurt them. Rocks, plants, feathers. And with that can spark great conversations and So for example, I've had children bring in rocks where there's some weathering on that, and that's a third grade science topic that I teach about. And so it's just exposing them, encouraging prior knowledge. Also, another way to motivate, you could display photographs or images of the natural world. So perhaps they're not able to see different types of landforms face to face in nature. You could bring an image in. You could bring in images of different water types, different landscapes of the season, erosion, and then sunrise and sunset. And again, this could tie in with your science units, spark conversations, and hopefully, spark them wanting to go outside and see these different things, and maybe go home and talk to their families about this, and just trying to encourage and motivate to get outside and see these beautiful landforms and water, and then go explore and learn from that. And also providing access to books about nature is a great way to motivate. There's so many great books out there about nature, or even stories that just incorporate nature. If you go to the next slide, Jeanine. So our nature PLT, we've been together for about 2 years now. And I would say for about the last year and a half, we've been working on a children's book. So these are illustrations from our children's book, and we were very fortunate to find a PTA parent who is an amazingly talented illustrator. So in the previous slide, there are 2 illustrations that are showing animal homes. So in our children's book, it's about 3 friends that go on an adventure in nature, and they come upon animal homes. So to the left, there is a hole beside a tree, and then to the right, a nest in a tree. And then in the book, they get to choose which path would they like to go down. Would they like to learn what animal lives in that hole, or what animal lives in the nest? So it's sort of like the choose your adventure books that are pretty popular right now. And from there, we go on to talking about animal sounds. Animal homes is what we start with. Evidence of animals. So we bring in the word scat, which the children think is very funny. So animal droppings, because we can learn a lot from animal droppings. What's the diet of the animal? What could the scat be connected to? What animal? Evidence of animals could also be acorns. So outside currently, you probably have seen squirrels very busy burying the acorns. So that's evidence of animals. So this book has been really special to us, and it's just another way that we motivate our own students. And ultimately, when it's finished, hopefully soon, we're going to, make some copies of this, share with our coworkers, and just another way to promote nature and all that it can teach us. Another way to motivate learning in nature, this nature challenge we recently created, and we haven't started it yet, but it's pretty much like a friendly challenge. So you could do this with your building, you could do it with your grade level or the team that you're on. And how you participate is someone has to start off the nature challenge. So on the right, you'll see all the different nature challenges that you could participate in. And these are just examples. So I see find animal evidence, use sticks to show different types of angles, locate animal homes. So once you and your class complete one of these challenges, you would then share this with another class and basically tag them that, you're up next. So what are you going to choose for your nature challenge? And so ultimately the goal, each class would tag another class to complete a nature challenge. So it's sparking that curiosity, that imagination. and it's getting the kids to talk about what can I learn in nature. So like, for example, finding symmetry. That's a huge math topic in the elementary years. So finding symmetry in nature, it's tying in with those skills. Making inferences about animals. I know in third grade, I do a lot of work with making inferences, drawing conclusions. And so tying that into nature and linking it with your ELA skills is just another way to foster that deep learning. Another way to motivate, and this was something that I found when COVID first was starting and we were at home. So this was a 30-day challenge of helping you stay outside while maintaining social distance. So I did this with my class while we were teaching remote, and I used the program Flipgrid. And so I started it off with just like, so for the next 30 days, we're going to be doing this daily dose of nature challenge. And I started off with something that I had done, and I chose number 23, a night walk. And I talked about the difference in temperature, the different sounds that I heard, the level of sounds that was different compared to the day. And the Flipgrid video, I only had it for like 1 minute, but then the children in my class would respond with what their daily dose of nature challenge was. And it was just a great way, sparking imagination and getting their families out in nature. And it was very well received, and the families really enjoyed it as much as the kids. And finally, so a great way to motivate kids is getting pictures of animals that are nearby their homes or their school. So Andrew really promoted this to me. So Andrew had a wildlife camera, and he had spoken to me about it. And I was like, that's something I have to have. You know, I love animals, and I know my students would love it. And in third grade, interdependence of organisms is one of our science topics, so it ties in really well. So I wrote a grant to purchase this wildlife camera, and it was accepted. So I've had this wildlife camera for about a year, and it detects any motion that is happening, and it could take photos or videos. And I've gotten pictures of fox, deer, squirrel, chipmunk. I had a fisher, which was pretty exciting and rare for the students to see. Rabbits, a lot of local house cats I got picked up on the wildlife camera. But this is a huge motivator for the children. It helped us with our graphing in math. We would graph how many times we saw a particular animal. If you look at the photos in the left corner, it's the date, the time, and then to the right, it gives the moon phase and then the temperature. So we would record all of that data, and then we would draw conclusions about why are we seeing the animals during this particular time of the night, or why are we seeing the animals during this range of temperature? So it just sparked great conversations, and the children absolutely loved it. And I'm really glad that I'm incorporating it into my classroom, and I highly, highly encourage. Even if you can't get a wildlife camera, there's so many websites where you can track like local wildlife, and you can have access to these photos, and just, it's a great way of learning. So conclusion of all my slides, I just feel like there's many ways to motivate your students to become involved in nature, but ultimately I would have to say that it starts with us. If we are showing that excitement and that enthusiasm, it really trickles to our students. Thank you.
Okay. So to provide access to nature, you don't really need to be located in or near nature to provide access. As Sara was saying, you can bring it into your classroom and really dive deep into the nature you do have access to, and think about what's outside your window. Are there wooded areas, playgrounds, nature preserves, a community park, or a community garden? We were talking in a group last night, and it was about ecosystems, and we just happened to stumble across a video about a park ranger who was taking a group of students on an urban safari. So they lived in an urban area, and they walked through this urban area looking for signs of things you might find in a forest. And they found things such as an empty lot. That then they had a really in-depth conversation about what animals might use that empty lot in the middle of this urban area. So really, you can just look around to find out many areas. As you see the picture, that's a student, happens to be at our school, and that's just a little courtyard outside one of our wings in our school. And he's doing a what's called a citizen science project that we have set up there. They're just watching a bird feeder and taking recordings of what birds visit the bird feeder, what time. And that particular program is run through Cornell. So they're helping scientists, and it's something you can do even if you don't have a tree outside. You could just do a stand with a bird feeder there. So there's many ways to provide access to nature. You can bring it into the classroom, or like I said, even if you don't have a wooded area, you can still utilize nature. Community partners. There are many community partners that have programs already established or who are willing to come into your classroom, or also in this time do virtual programs. The one that's highlighted, New York State Connect Kids, that is through the Park Service, New York State Park Service, and they will actually give you a grant when we're back in normal times and can take field trips. They have a $1,000 grant that you can get that will pay for transportation and the fee to access if you go to a state park or wherever you're going to take the field trip, as long as it relates to nature. I did put a link there so that you can take a look at it and see all the great areas that you could go to and that apply for this grant. There's DEC. In our area, there's Five Rivers Environmental Center, Hudson River Foundation. Check your community for local experts. There's one gentleman in our community who does pond ecology. And one year he brought his pond ecology into the classroom, and the kids really got excited to see what life is really going on in a pond. There's Saratoga National Park, and there's higher education. Local universities often have programs. So there are many ways to provide access, even if you don't live in a rural area. Another way to provide access to nature is to incorporate it into engaging lessons. And don't be afraid to use technology when you're doing lessons about nature, but use it as a gateway. So you can do such things as photojournals, and there's many apps out there that are a great way for the children to investigate further or to spark that initial desire to learn about something and then go out into nature or bring nature into the classroom. There's an app called About My Woods that you can locate your area, and it tells you all about your woods in that area, and that was free. There's Plant Snap. They can go out and they can do plant identification. Take them out at night. Get them looking at the stars. There's Star Chart, which is really quite interesting. You can hold it up and they can look, and it tells them what stars they're looking at or what constellations are right above them at certain times of the year. So that's something really nice to do in the evening. And of course, Google Earth, so that they can get an idea of what nature looks like around them. There's also some websites that are great, and I just listed a few. That Urban Safari I found was on PBS. It goes into ecosystems, different types of ecosystems. And it was really interesting, that particular one, because as the students walked to a high point in their urban setting and they looked out and they actually saw a lot more green than they really realized was in their city. And it was an eye-opening experience for them. So again, you can use technology as a support or as a way to spark that interest. There's National Geographic, and then there's also some great things on the Smithsonian, and there's hundreds of different websites that really can benefit your instruction about nature. As Sara said, trail cameras are a great way to bring nature into the classroom. Live animal cams from zoos. My students in third grade were learning about balanced and unbalanced forces, and their project is they have to solve the problem of rescuing a tiger that's been trapped in a moat. So I turned on the San Diego Zoo, has a tiger cam. Again, that's not nature they would find here, but it exposes them to nature in other parts of the world, and they can kind of get a sense of what that real life animal does in its own environment while they're trying to solve the problem of rescuing the tiger. So many ways to utilize technology as a gateway or as a support. One benefit for utilizing nature in your lessons is one, supplies are relatively cheap depending on what you're doing, and they're accessible to students. This really became evident to me when we went fully remote in the spring. The curriculum that I teach is hands-on, and I wanted to really maintain that for my students. So my challenge was, how do I do this with the kids at home? What supplies do they have that they can access? And so that they can still get that creative problem-solving experience while they're home. So what I did, I turned to nature. These are some kindergartners, and we were talking about structure and function. We read the story, Rhoda's Rock Hunt, bringing that ELA component. And then they went out and they found just rocks. We talked about sorting the rocks into small, medium, large. We talked about the structure and the function. What would make the most sense to, structurally to put on the bottom, the big rocks, the small rocks. So again, getting them outside and having them learn from things in nature. This was another one. We read Dr. Seuss, Yertle the Turtle. And in that story, Yertle is a king, the turtle king, and he wants to have a throne that is as high as he can be, so that he can see his kingdom. So that was their challenge. That was their problem to solve. So they worked through the engineering design process, and they went out and just gathered sticks and built the tallest throne that they could. And then they were challenged, could it hold Yertle the turtle? So they had to get something heavy and see if their throne could hold it up. And again, they had a ball doing this, going out and just exploring what they could find to build with. Again, another Mr. McGregor's garden. This was a little bit different. They had to see if they could keep Peter Rabbit out of the garden. So they had to think about structure in a different way. My first graders were learning about light. And so they went out, I had them go out and just gather things. Some used things from nature, some chose other things, but they went out and put it on a piece of construction paper, and they left it out, and they made shadow prints. So they learned about light and shadows outside, and you can kind of get the sense, you can see some leaves that they selected, some ferns. So they also got to explore some of the different things in nature and their different shapes. This was for a little bit older students. We did Three Billy Goats Gruff. We were talking about properties of matter and buoyancy. They had to figure out a way to cross over the river without going over the bridge that had the troll underneath. And one way they could do it is to get something to float, so they could float across the river. And the other one was to build a new bridge. Now, these two young boys took it to the extreme. They got their dad, and they actually went out and built. They have a little stream, and they built a crossing over it. But a lot of students just gathered sticks and stones and built their bridge inside. So again, covering those science standards in nature. This was solar oven and properties of matter. In second grade, we learn about conductors and insulators. And so they built their solar oven. They had to test their materials and see what would make the best solar oven. And it transcended right up to fifth graders with thermal conductivity and energy. We did, of course, we had Earth Day, and so they did recycling projects. They were so proud of how they helped the environment by getting out there and either collecting trash or recycling things into new items. We learned about balanced and unbalanced forces. My third graders were doing simple machines, and they would build them outside. My older students were learning about potential and kinetic energy. So we used zip lines outside, and they would raise one end of the zip line, and we talk about the increase in potential energy and how it related to the distance that their passenger would travel on their zip line. And then for fifth graders, we were talking about how energy goes through an ecosystem. And so they built mini composters. And it's also sparked, we had information about starting a garden. It was springtime, and they really got interested in how their compost would affect their garden. And so it was really a way to spark their interest in getting outside, starting a garden, and also learning about science, learning about ecosystems and how the energy is transferred. So these are just some examples of lessons that incorporated nature, either having students go out into nature or bringing nature into the house and doing some engineering design process with that. So there's many opportunities for that. And with that, I think we're ready. If you stop sharing my screen, and we'd love to take some questions, or if anybody would like to take the opportunity to share some of your experiences or your ideas of how to incorporate nature into your classrooms, that would be great.
Just so everyone knows, questions can be posed in the Q&A. You can enter the questions there. Or if you have any comments, they can go there as well.
Well, I'll raise a question. Sarah, you discussed getting a grant, receiving a grant to purchase a very unique camera that allows you to take photographs in the evening. What is the cost for a camera like that, and where did you purchase it?
So the grant was through my school district, through our educational foundation. And the wildlife camera is Reconex, and it's pretty highly rated for wildlife camera capturing, and it has daytime, nighttime, and the price of that was $490. So, and I mean, that's a very well received one. You could also get them ranging from like $200 to $300. But the reviews on the Reconex were pretty great, so that's why I leaned towards that one. And then you could also go even above and beyond, and there's wildlife cameras out there for like $1,000. So The range is about, from what I've seen, $200 to over $1,000.
You can get into cheaper ones if you're like an entry level and you're just you don't want to wait for the grant. You can get into them for $60, $70. Like Sarah said, you're not going to get all the data that you're going to get with the ones that she uses, but you can, if you just want to get started and just get a picture of an animal and just spark that interest to motivate them, there are cheaper ones, but there's lots of places that'll offer grants out there. If you're interested, you can reach out to any of us, and we know some really good avenues to get money.
That happened to be one of the questions, I think, from one of our attendees. They ask any grant recommendations for equipment not through your district's foundation.
Yeah, I just saw that. I don't have any specific ones, but just thinking the U.S. Department of Education, Agriculture, perhaps something at a federal
New York State Ag Foundation has grants for things like that too. You can actually just Google that, and they have a lot of stuff for that.
And someone's recommending the Catskill Watershed Corporation for grants.
Also noticed in the Q&A that somebody was asking about like establishing a warm area to, take your students out to. I know at our school, they did purchase tents for us to go out, like so you can take your classes outside under the big tents. I don't know, they don't have sides on them. They wanted to keep it as open as possible. I'm not sure if you could get like outdoor heaters, those kind of the ones they have on patios. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas. Someone does tree ID. That's true, and it can be done both inside and out. That's a great idea.
I have a question for the panelists. With learning occurring online and also face-to-face, depending on the community that your student may attend, how are you engaging more students to do outdoor learning and encouraging parents and providing them with the tools to assist their learner? Not only to keep them mentally but also healthy, by going outside during, especially like the fall semester, what have you. I'm just wondering if you're finding yourself doing that more, given the current climate.
Well, I can honestly say yes. And the parents, giving them suggestions and having them, provide activities for the students to get outside. They're so thankful. Because they're looking for ways to keep them, and again, a lot of them are at home still, but they're looking for ways to keep them engaged, have them be outside. So they are very appreciative of any suggestions or activities we provide for students that draw them out to the outdoors. So.
Great. How about you, Sarah?
I would have to agree with Jeanine. Getting outside is so important during these times, especially for the remote learners who are on the computer all day long. From what I've shared with my parents in my classroom, any newsletter encouraging different, so like for example, the Daily Dose of Nature Challenge, they're very appreciative of the ideas and any way that they can get their families outside. My PE teacher at my school currently is hosting weekend pickups of our trail. So we have a wooded area behind our school, and everyone comes with rakes and like their hedge trimmers, and they help tidy up the trail. So it's now community based, and they love it, and they know that it helps the PE classes. They know that the teachers are bringing the kids outside to utilize the trail and do some lessons out there. So it really has branched out into the community.
That's wonderful. It also lends itself for opportunities for interdisciplinary learning, right? So, and that's a nice example of the beginning of that occurring at your school.
And I just know the encouragement, because I know as we have spent so much time on the screen, I know myself just getting out for even a 10, 15-minute walk really changes my whole mental state. So just encouraging that. And even in school, you know, even during mass breaks, and that's kind of what stemmed that nature challenge that we kind of came up with in the PLT. Just while kids are even outside taking a mass break, they can't have recess like they normally do. So giving even teachers ideas to, while they're taking a mass break or outside with them, something simple like, you know, snapping pictures of the clouds or looking at the clouds. What animals do you see in the clouds? Things they can do while they're outside taking those mass breaks, you know, just because they can't have recesses as normal.
It's wonderful. Well, I'm looking at the time and it's 5:01, and I can't thank you enough for today's presentation. I will be sharing this video on our Remote ED website. I also will be placing the resources that you mentioned onto our resource center so that for those who could not attend will also have access to that information. This has been wonderful. I think that there are many takeaways. So I thank you all for your time and for sharing your expertise. And with that said, I wish you all health and happiness. Thank you again and good night.